Hi, everyone. It's Plastic EP with Spencer Drate. Interviews Down Under. We've got a fantastic guest for you. Mark Weiss, we love him. We know that he's one of the greatest photographers out there. He's got one of the biggest books on the net for sale, The Decade That Rock, and we're ready to rock and roll, aren't we, Spencer?
We are there, man. And let me tell you, it's a real privilege in my life being an album cover designer, notorious. During the 80s, where I made my mark on famous rockers and punk album covers, Mark was doing his thing for famous people in that decade. So this book is very close to my heart. It's one of the greatest books that I have seen in design and photography, printing, and name it, it's got it. And I've interviewed some of the great rock photographers in the past, like Bob Gruen, Lynn Goldsmith, Mick Rock, of course, and Danny Clinch. But this book is extraordinary. And Mark has an extraordinary career. So let's get into it. We're going to go over a little bit of Mark's life, which should be interesting. Mark, tell me how you started the early years.
Well, I started my early years by just, my parents moved into Lake Ridge in Matawan, New Jersey. It's a new development, and people just started moving in there, and the grass, there wasn't any grass there, and then the grass started growing, and then all the people that were supposed to be mowing their lawns weren't mowing it. They didn't have lawnmowers yet, and I had one, and I started knocking on doors, and I was doing it for about $5 a cut. And then this one guy, I knocked on his door, and I said, do you need your lawn mowed? Because he usually cut his lawn, but this time he didn't cut it. And he's like, I cut it myself. And I said, well, it doesn't look like it. And he kind of gave me a little smirk. And he said, I'll tell you what, kid. He came back with this camera, this Bell & Howell Canon camera. Wow. And he said, if you mow my lawn for the season, I'll give it to you. And I looked at it, and I'm like, maybe I'll just pawn it after the summer and make a couple $100 out of it. So that's what I thought. And I got this camera. And once I got the camera, I didn't pawn it. I just kind of, put it on my bookcase and looked at it. And then one day I just started playing around with it, and had some help from some people developing film, and I just started getting involved. And then I started getting involved in rock and roll when I was a couple of years later. And next thing you know it, I'm shooting people, taking photos.
Yeah, and your first shot was a really big one. Was with Steve Tyler in 1978 at Circus Magazine. The story on that?
Yeah. The Circus Magazine was I was still sneaking in my camera, and I was 1978, and I got my first picture published with Steven Tyler of Aerosmith, Circus Magazine. Yeah.
And I was saying, you've taken photos of Kiss too.
Yeah, I got arrested for selling Kiss photographs for $1 a piece.
Yeah, right.
which is what, backtracking it a year from the centerfold of Circus Magazine.
Yeah,
that's how I got my first break, by getting arrested at it, selling pictures of Kiss in 1977. Because what happened was I got arrested, then I went to jail overnight, and the next day I said, all right, now what am I going to do? And I opened up my Circus Magazine, and there was an address, and I went there, and I brought my photographs with me, and it was good timing. The secretary took a liking to me, and she said, when when the art director said, when you think you have something with this certain kind of film, come back. And that's when the Aerosmith Ted Nugent show was, and I just left it in the office, and a couple of months later, it was a centerfold.
Wow. And then you got, there's two great stories here. Apparently you connected Sebastian Bach to Skid Row. That's one story. And then Zack Wilde to Ozzy. Tell us about both those stories. They're very interesting, actually.
Okay, well, with the Zack, I've been shooting Ozzy since 1981 for Circus Magazine. I met him when I was doing a cover, and we just developed a good relationship, and we became friends. And when Sharon said that we needed a new guitar player, I went with them to see a couple in Long Island, and it wasn't the right person. And I just said, I'll keep my eyes open. The very next day, I told my friend Dave Feld to meet me at a club just to hang out and have some drinks. And he's like, no, I'm not going to go. And I said, well, I'm going. So I ended up not going. He ended up going. He saw Zack Wilde playing this band called Zyrus. And then he called me up and he said, I found this kid, Zack, and I think he'd be perfect for Ozzy. I'm like, I said, okay, why don't you just bring him by the studio? If you're that, he was very excited about it. And I have Ozzy coming to my studio. Wow. And let's tell him to bring his guitar and the practice amp, and we'll put him in front of Ozzy and Sharon and see what they think. And unfortunately, that night, Ozzy got very drunk with Andre the Giant, and they never made it to my studio. And I told Sharon that I had this kid here all day, and she felt bad. And she's like, well, just take some photos, some Polaroids, and put the cassette in and leave it at the hotel, and we'll listen to it. And when they got to England, she said, bring him over, for an audition. And so me and Zack went over there, and he got the gig, So that's Zack. And then Sebastian was kind of a similar story. I was shooting Madam X. Sebastian was in a band called Madam X from 1985. There was a band called Madam X on Jet Records. And then a year later, they had a new singer, which Sebastian was, and then they had me fly to shoot him, fly over to Texas. And then 4 months later, I was getting married, and I told my secretary to invite that crazy band that was like, I just started becoming friends with. They were the last people that got invited to my wedding, and I didn't think they were going to make it, but they did. And we became fast friends and hung out. And John Bon Jovi's parents were at the wedding, and Sebastian saw an opportunity to impress him a little bit, because maybe they can put in a good word with his son, who had a band called Skid Row. His son's best friend, Snake, Dave Sabo. Yeah. And just kind of trying to do a little bit of schmoozing. My friend Dave Feld, who was my best man at my wedding, knew the Skid Row guys. I didn't really know them. I just knew Snake going to my photo shoots. Whenever I would do a shoot with John, he would kind of tag along, like my friend Dave Feld would tag along. So he kept a friendship, and Sebastian went on, took over the stage with Zack Wilde and with Kevin Dubrow from Quiet Riot.
Wow.
And they started singing and playing about a half hour's worth of songs, and John's parents saw him, and Dave Feld made the connection with the band and brought Sebastian in, and he ended up in Skid Row.
Isn't it fantastic how where you start, you end up with Bon Jovi and doing the cover of Slippery When Wet? I mean, how unreal is that for that timing? Every young dude and young chick is watching what you're doing.
Yeah, I first met John, and it's in my book, when I didn't meet him. I just photographed him. He was 18. It was opening up for Southside Johnny. I just happened to be taking pictures, and it was the opening act, and I took some pictures of him. And that's kind of my first recollection of John. But then a few years later, in '83, they opened up for ZZ Top after winning this contest. And I was like, oh, these guys are pretty good. And then a couple years later, Doc McGee, who was managing Motley Crue, said, I got this band that I'm managing called band called Bon Jovi. And I said, oh yeah, no, I heard of Bon Jovi. And he said he wanted me to do a publicity shoot in 1985.
I got to tell you the story. So I get a call from Arthur Mann, who signed Bon Jovi and Cinderella. And he said, Spence, you want to work on Bon Jovi's first album? I said, yeah, I didn't know who he was, Mark. And he said, what do you think of the name of Bon Jovi? And the first thing that came out of my head, Mark, was Van Halen. I said, Bon Jovi, Van Halen. And then John would come into my office, and all he talked about was Van Halen. All he talked about, did you see the Jump video, right, Mark? And he ended up, I think, using a lot of Van Halen stylists and all this stuff later. But that was my introduction to John. And then that Slippery When Wet was a monster album, by the way, right? I mean, that was amazing in his life.
Yeah, I mean, that went, the writing was great, the music was great, everything was in order, and then they needed the right image for it, and
you had it.
Well, it started. We didn't have it because at first it was going to be called "Wanted Dead or Alive" because of their song, and we
Right.
dressed, they were dressed up like cowboys and like they were in a
Oh,
gang.
really? Oh,
And
wow.
so
Wow.
that was the first photo shoot over in
Oh,
Vancouver.
wow.
And then it was going to be this little kid dressed up like a cowboy, and that was going to be a cover. And then we decided to do the car wash thing after they changed the name to Slippery When Wet, inspired by the strip club over in Canada, and the road sign, of course. And so I shot that with the girl and the t-shirt. And then the PMRC was in full swing, and it wasn't the right time for that kind of an image to go
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, so that was interesting. I mean, that's a really great. I love that album, by the way, and the photo is really great. But the next thing is in the book, you have a couple of people that I designed with, and they are the Ramones, Joan Jett. Tell us how you met Joan Jett. What was that like?
Yeah, Joan was kind of hanging out in the office with Lieber Krebs. They weren't managing them; they were just using their resources. They were helping them out, and I was. Lieber Krebs at the time was managing Ted Nugent, Aerosmith, AC/DC, Scorpions, and I had a friend named Carol Kay, who was the publicist, invited me to the office and use their phone when I wanted to and just hang out. So I was kind of part of the fixture there and do trade shots for them and things like that. And so, Joan was in the office a lot and hung out. And then when she started her solo album and her first one, and she went on a little tour, I would, pop in and do some photos backstage, on stage, and developed a little relationship where, she kind of let me in her world and, took some like the photographs that are in the book, on the bus, just kind of listening to demos and, just fly on the wall type stuff. So that was a kick because I loved the Runaways back then. I was 17 when they came out.
Yeah.
And what guy in high school didn't like the Runaways? And so that's how my relationship with Joan. The Ramones, I always wanted to photograph them.
Yeah.
And I was trying to find a way to, because I was a little more metal, rock and roll, and the magazines that I was kind of penned in with, like Circus, Hit Parader, and some of the metal magazines, they really didn't do the Ramones, but I really wanted to shoot them. So I reached out to Cream Magazine and I said, look, they're recording a record in the recording studio. Can I use your name to do a photo shoot with them? And they said, we'll send you some Boy Howdy can labels and do a photo shoot, Boy Howdy shoot. So that's what I did. And that's how I got those photographs in there.
Yeah. I mean, you work with so many great people. I worked with Billy Squier on Don't Say No, which was a big album, and you did shoot of him. I saw some really great shots of him. But you've worked with like Aerosmith, Def Leppard. I mean, the names are crazy. I mean, Quiet Riot, Motley Crue, because Ozzy, of course, Judas Priest. By the way, the write-up in your book by Eddie Trunk and Rob Halford, a really great write-up in your book.
Oh yeah, they did. Rob did the forward, and Eddie Trunk did the afterword. And they, it was really nice of them. I've known them all for decades, and when I asked them to do it, they said absolutely. So those are the two perfect people to do that in my book. So I was really happy with how that came out.
You got a great intro shot with Slash. Tell us about Slash, how you met him.
I met Guns N' Roses on my first photo shoot with them in 1986. It's when their hair was all like really at its highest. They had hair really high for about up until 1986. They took it down in 87, I think. And it was just a new band. And the publicist, Bryn Breidenthal, who was also Motley Crue's publicist, it said, I got this new band, and I know the magazines are going to want them, and I just did a photo shoot on spec, and we got along, and that was the beginning of a really good relationship.
I got to say that your timing, Mark, is like impeccable. When you look back at the career and the major bands that you did, this is like history. You've captured history now in your book, and that's what I'm trying to say. You can't bring that time back. It's like never going to happen again, but the world was turned onto these bands and the music. So when you look at these photos that you got, I mean, it's like, it blows my mind because it's never going to happen again. You've captured their young age. You've captured them at their peak. I mean, you must feel inside, hey, look where I started, but look where I've ended up. To me, it's an unbelievable story. That's why your
Yeah,
book's great.
Yeah, and not only that, Mark, I've worked with great photographers, but you're one of the great ones, and I really respect your work. The other part of you that's really amazing is you're very incredible in color. Mick Rock was like that in color, and you're really incredible in color. And the other thing is your concepts of your photo shoots, which the settings that you deal with each group is different and really incredible. We to have a mindset like that makes you very exceptional in my mind. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, thanks. Well, I mean, the 80s is the most colorful decade out of all of them. I mean, you know, the 70s were kind of like pastel, you know, and then the 80s, the 80s and everything, it was all, you know, it was like looking through a kaleidoscope, you know, and they had the glitzy spandex and the stones, and
yeah,
you know, I was just following their lead and adding to it by adding some colored gels and smoke and shiny objects in the background and making it more colorful. So I was just following their lead.
So the main question I want to ask is, what photographers did you look up to in your life?
Well, you know, when I was reading rock scene magazines, Circus and Cream and a lot of those mags, I always came across that kind of quote was actually those three that you mentioned. Ironically enough, it was Mick Rock and Bob Gruen and Lynn Goldsmith, all for different reasons. I like Mick because he was very flamboyant and very it seems like he was friends with everybody, and he got that accent that, you know, and he was very stylish, and I liked Bob Gruen because he was very down and dirty, and you could tell he hung out with him like just in the clubs, and it just seems like he would create his environment by knowing where they are and making sure he was there, more like photojournalist kind of thing. And then Lynn I admire because she's a great business person, and I always looked up to her, and she kind of you know, I spent the most time with her actually out of all of those other two I mentioned. Lynn and I became friends.
Oh, wow.
Still to this day, and we you know, she's did a little bit of everything. She did some great studio work. She hung out with the bands. I mean, you know, she was a fly on the wall, and she was managing like Grand Funk, and she was doing like movies. She was doing everything.
Yeah.
So really, like I feel like out of each decade, there's like three like photographers that kind of capture it in a way where you know. So in the 60s there was like Gerald Markowitz and Henry Diltz and Jim Marshall.
Yeah. Oh, Jim Marshall, amazing, right?
And I mean, there's other great photographers too. Those are just three that come to my mind in both cases. And in the 80s, I was there to capture it, and there was a couple other guys, Niels Lozauer and Ross Halfin, who we kind of had this competitive, not rivalry, but you know, we wanted to get that shot. So I think the three of us kind of kept us on our toes. But the others, there's so many rock photographers in the 80s, and most of them just kind of, you know, were doing it and didn't really make a business out of it after the 80s. You know, I mean, the trick is keeping it, not going with the fad, and just going with that music, is just continuing on and keep creating with, you know, whatever it is, other musicians, or I mean, in my case, I hit the 90s with doing shoots for Soundgarden and Alice in Chains. I didn't really connect with those people, but I'd done a handful of photo shoots and shot them live, and so I kind of like didn't embrace that because they didn't embrace me, probably because I was from the 80s and they didn't want the guy that shot Twisted Sister Stay Hungry with the Holding the Bone or Slippery When Wet or Night Songs or Dokken, you know what I mean? So having that success with those bands kind of hurt me to try to connect with the other people. It wasn't for me. And then when the 90s, when the end of the 90s, I started working for a German magazine called Bravo, and I started getting assignments. Like I shot like one of the first Backstreet Boys shoots in sync.
Oh, really?
And then I shot Christina Aguilera when she did Genie in the Bottle, and then I became her photographer. I did an album cover for her, and then Gwen Stefani, and then 10 years later, I started doing a lot of rap and hip hop. So I've done a lot of body of work, but I'm most proud of what's represented in my book.
And you've also done a lot of album cover work, which I noticed on your list, which is really phenomenal. To get a chance as a photographer to be on a number of album covers, is a big thing. And your work is phenomenal. I mean, the book really is very intense. I mean, if I want people to know that this book, The Decade That Rocked, is on Insight Edition, so people know, and that it's a big table type book. It's very thick. It's got a lot of photographs that are phenomenal. Maybe you could show it. Yeah,
it's right
yeah. There we go.
And there's some gatefolds in it too that pop out. It's always hard to get to them. There's the Ozzy one.
You love Ozzy. Oh yeah, yeah. That Ozzy shoot, man. I mean, that's phenomenal. That's crazy stuff. The Ozzy shoot.
Yeah,
but I gotta say, I got the book, so I can't praise it enough, right? It's so heavy. I don't know how it came to Australia. Right? The postage cost me a lot. But I just want to say now, Mark, when you look back at your career, I mean it, you're at the crest of the wave all the way through, even if you don't even know it. But I mean, if you look now in 2022, I'm not trying to make it hard, but is there one particular photo that when you wake up today, in this day and age, and you say, that was it? I captured the genie in the bottle with that photo. Is there like one photo that stands out in your mind that you really like, affects you and you love?
Probably the one with Ozzy in the bathtub, because it was the first time I met him, and we just developed this amazing relationship. And it was just as simple as me knocking on the door, I was there to do a photo shoot, with portrait, and Sharon let me in, and she goes, "Oh, go say hi to Ozzy," and he's in there. And she pointed me into the bathroom, and he was in the bathtub. and then when I saw him in the bathtub, I said, "Hey, Ozzy, I'm Mark. I work with Circus. Do you mind if I take some pictures of you in the bathtub?" And we put some bubbles in there, and then there was some champagne bottles we put in there, and I gave him a cigar, and then that's how we got our first shot. So. That's
so cool, man. My favorite group is AC/DC. Tell us a little bit about that before we wrap up here.
Well, in the book, you can see I did one photo shoot with Angus, and it was for the cover of Faces magazine. It was down in Florida, and I only had like 10 minutes with him, and I just set up a backdrop, and then I wanted to get other material so we can use it for this and for that.
Yeah.
And then there was a sign that said no smoking, and I took the sign. And we put a cigarette in his mouth, and we snapped that by a trap case. So. Those are moments, I only had 10, 15 minutes, but we got it looks like we did like 3 or 4 photo shoots, and looks like I shot them for like an hour. But, a lot of times it's like right before they go on stage. So it's, you get what you get. And I got that, and it was an awesome shoot.
I just got to say now, this is a fantastic episode. Interviews Down Under with Plastic EP and Spencer Drate. We want to thank you so much, Mark Weiss, for being in the show. Just tell everybody now the link to go out and buy The Decade to Rock. This is one of the greatest rock books out there. Give them the links.
You just go to thedecadethatrocked.com, and it's there. You can, I personalize them. I throw them postcards. You can get it on Amazon too. They're in bookstores. So that's pretty much about it. And I do also have this book called Keep On Rolling that we can talk about another time. It's a story of Kevin Dubrow and his band Dubrow and Quiet Riot of the fan club president, with memoirs of his back and forth with early shots of Randy Rhoads by my friend Ron Sobel and my photos. So that's going to be coming out in about 2 months. So
all right,
self-publishing it for the first time with my girlfriend Mikkel.
Oh wow, great
publishing, and it's just a new venture for the two of us, and it's a passion project, and we're very proud of it. And tell Kevin's story, who was like one of my best rocker friends back then, who sadly passed away, several years ago.
I just want to say thank you, Keith Roth, for getting Mark and I together for this.